My cousin announced they were taking my cabin for summer. Everyone loved the idea, but when they drove 8 hours up the mountain and I activated the new security system, the cameras caught their shocked faces discovering the truth. Subscribe to the channel and like the video to see more stories like this. We're taking your cabin for the summer, my cousin announced in the family group chat. Everyone loved the idea. I watched them drive 8 hours up the mountain. Then I activated the new security system. The cameras caught their faces when they realized what they had walked into. The notification popped up on my phone at exactly 7:37 on a Tuesday morning. Derek, my cousin, had sent a message to our family group chat with the casual confidence of someone who had never been told no in his entire privileged life. Hey everyone, Lisa and I decided we're taking Jake's cabin for our summer vacation with the kids. It's perfect timing since he never uses it anyway. Within minutes, the responses started flooding in. Heart emojis from my Aunt Sarah. What a wonderful idea. From my Uncle Tom. Even my own mother chimed in with, that sounds lovely, Derek. Jake won't mind. Not a single person asked me. Not one family member thought to check if I had plans for my own property. They simply assumed that because I lived in the city and worked long hours as a software developer, my mountain retreat was somehow community property available for their convenience. But what none of them knew was that I had been planning something special for that cabin all summer long. Something that would change everything. I had inherited the cabin from my grandfather 2 years ago. A rustic but beautiful property nestled in the Colorado Rockies about 8 hours from Denver. Grandpa Joe had built it himself in 1973. Every board and beam placed with his own weathered hands. It wasn't fancy by modern standards, but it was mine. The deed had my name on it. I paid the property taxes, the insurance, the maintenance. Yet somehow, my family had convinced themselves that it belonged to all of us. This wasn't the first time Derek had made assumptions about my property. Last Christmas, he had suggested I should let the family use it for their ski trips. You're never there anyway, he had said with that entitled smirk of his. It's just sitting empty while the rest of us could be making memories. I had politely declined, explaining that I needed my space for work retreats and personal time. The conversation had ended with Derek calling me selfish, and my mother suggesting I should be more generous with family. The truth was, I visited that cabin every single weekend. It was my sanctuary, the place where I recharged after dealing with demanding clients and impossible deadlines. I had spent countless hours renovating it, upgrading the plumbing, installing new windows, building a deck that overlooked the valley below. Every improvement came from my own pocket, my own sweat, my own vision for what Grandpa Joe's legacy could become. But my family saw only what they wanted to see, an empty cabin going to waste while their favorite golden boy Derek struggled to afford a proper family vacation. Derek, who drove a $70,000 SUV and lived in a house 3 times the size of my downtown apartment. Derek, who had never worked a day of manual labor in his life, but somehow deserved access to the fruits of my grandfather's efforts. The rage that built in my chest was unlike anything I had ever felt. Not the quick flash of anger that comes and goes, but something cold and calculating that settled into my bones like winter frost. These people who claimed to love me, who invited me to birthday parties and holiday dinners, had just revealed exactly how much respect they had for me as a person. 0. I opened my laptop and began typing my response, my fingers moving with steady precision across the keyboard. But instead of sending an angry message to the group chat, I opened a different application entirely, the security company's software that I had installed just 3 weeks ago, after my last visit to the cabin. See, Derek and my family didn't know about my recent promotion at work. They didn't know that I had been made senior developer for a company that specialized in home security systems, or that I had been beta testing our latest product line at my own cabin. They had no idea that every inch of that property was now monitored by state-of-the-art cameras with motion sensors, audio recording, and real-time alerts sent directly to my phone. They also didn't know about the other modifications I had made to the cabin over the past month. The new locks that could only be opened with a specific app on my phone, the smart thermostat that I could control remotely, the water pump that required an electronic override to function, and most importantly, they didn't know about the little surprise I had prepared for anyone who decided to help themselves to my property without permission. Instead of responding to the group chat, I sent Derek a private message. Hey cuz, just saw your message. The cabin's all yours for the summer. Have fun. I even added a smiley face emoji for good measure. His response came immediately. Thanks man, I knew you'd be cool about it. We're heading up this weekend. Perfect. The trap was set, and Derek had just walked right into it. I spent the rest of the week making final preparations. I called my security company and activated the premium monitoring package, ensuring that every camera angle would be recorded in high definition and stored on secure servers. I tested the remote access functions one more time, confirming that I could control every electronic system in the cabin from my downtown apartment. And I made one final modification to the cabin's main entrance, something that would make Derek's arrival particularly memorable. Friday afternoon, I received a notification that vehicles had been detected in the cabin's driveway. I opened the security app on my phone and watched as Derek's oversized SUV, followed by Lisa's white Mercedes, pulled up to my grandfather's cabin. Through the crystal-clear camera feeds, I could see Derek stretching dramatically as he got out of the driver's seat. Lisa immediately complaining about something while pointing at the cabin, and their twin boys racing around the property like they owned it. The audio picked up Derek's voice clearly. "See, honey? I told you Jake wouldn't mind. He's probably grateful someone's finally using this place." Lisa nodded, already directing the kids toward the front door. "It's smaller than I expected, but it'll do for a few weeks, at least until we can book something nicer." My jaw clenched as I watched Derek approach the front door, fishing in his pocket for something. That's when I realized he had somehow gotten a key, probably from my mother, who had a spare for emergencies. The family betrayal ran deeper than I had imagined. But Derek's confidence evaporated the moment he tried to insert the key into the lock. The old deadbolt had been replaced with a smart lock system, and the key he held was now completely useless. I watched through the security cameras as confusion spread across his face, then frustration as he tried the key multiple times, jiggling the handle and pressing his shoulder against the door. "The key doesn't work," he called to Lisa, who was busy unloading suitcases from her car. "Jake must have changed the locks." "Well, call him," Lisa snapped back. "We drove 8 hours to get here. I'm not sleeping in the car." This was my cue. I opened the two-way communication feature on the security system and spoke directly through the outdoor speakers. "Hey Derek, welcome to the cabin." Derek spun around, looking for the source of my voice. His eyes finally found one of the cameras mounted discreetly under the eaves. "Jake, where are you?" "The key isn't working." "Oh, that's weird," I said, injecting just the right amount of fake concern into my voice. "Must be a problem with the new security system. Let me check something real quick." I made them wait for exactly 10 minutes, watching through the cameras as their frustration mounted. Lisa kept glancing at her phone, probably checking for cell signal that barely existed this far up the mountain. The twins started whining about being hungry and tired. Derek paced back and forth, occasionally pulling out his own phone and shaking it at the sky. Finally, I spoke again through the speakers. "Good news. I figured out the problem. There's a new entry protocol for the cabin. You just need to complete the security verification first." "Security verification?" Derek asked, looking confused. "What kind of verification?" "It's simple," I said, pulling up the pre-recorded message I had prepared for this exact moment. "The system needs to confirm that you have proper authorization to access the property. Just state your full name, relationship to the property owner, and the specific permission you received to be here." Derek's face went slightly pale, but he stepped closer to the camera. "I'm Derek Sullivan, Jake's cousin. He said we could use the cabin for the summer." "Perfect," I replied. "Now the system just needs to verify that you have written permission from the property owner. Can you show the camera the text message or email where Jake specifically invited you to stay at the cabin?" The silence that followed was beautiful. I watched Derek's face as the reality of his situation began to sink in. He pulled out his phone, scrolling frantically through his messages. Of course, he found nothing, because I had never actually given him permission. He had simply announced his intentions and assumed my silence meant consent. Lisa approached the camera, her voice taking on the sharp edge I remembered from family gatherings when she didn't get her way. "This is ridiculous, Jake. Derek told everyone in the family chat that we were coming here. You even responded." "I did respond," I confirmed through the speakers. "I said the cabin was yours for the summer, but I never said you could stay in it." The confusion on their faces was priceless. Derek stepped back from the camera, running his hands through his hair. "I don't understand. What's the difference?" "Well," I said, settling back in my comfortable office chair as I watched their growing panic. "The cabin sits on 47 acres of beautiful mountain property. There's plenty of space for camping. I never said anything about going inside the actual building." "You've got to be kidding me," Lisa practically shrieked. "We're not camping. We have 2 young children." "That sounds like a planning problem," I replied calmly. "The nearest hotel is about 3 hours back down the mountain. Though I should warn you, it's getting pretty late in the day for that drive." Derek was getting desperate now. I could see it in the way he kept looking around the property, probably calculating how much money they had already spent on gas and groceries for this trip. "Come on, Jake. Be reasonable here. We're family." "You're absolutely right," I said. "We are family, and family asks permission before taking someone else's property. Family shows respect for boundaries. Family doesn't assume they can just help themselves to something that doesn't belong to them." The words hit their target. Derek's shoulders sagged as he realized that every argument he could make would only dig him deeper into the hole he had created. But Lisa wasn't giving up so easily. "Fine," she said, crossing her arms and glaring at the camera. "We'll call your mother. She'll straighten this out." I laughed, and the sound echoed through the speakers around the property. "Please do. Tell my mother exactly what happened. Tell her how you announced you were taking my cabin without asking. Tell her how you assumed I would just go along with whatever you decided. I'm sure she'll be very interested to hear about that conversation." The threat in my voice must have been clear, because Lisa's defiance crumbled. She looked at Derek, who was still staring at his phone like it might somehow provide a solution to their problem. "What do you want?" Derek finally asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "I want you to leave," I said simply. "I want you to drive your fancy cars back down this mountain and think about what you've learned today. And I want you to to remember this feeling the next time you decide to help yourself to something that belongs to someone else. But Derek wasn't ready to accept defeat. His entitled nature wouldn't let him walk away from what he saw as his rightful vacation. The family's going to hear about this, Jake. Everyone's going to know how selfish you're being. Actually, I said, unable to keep the satisfaction out of my voice, the family is going to hear about this, but not the version you're thinking of. That's when I revealed my masterpiece. You see, Derek, every word you've spoken since you arrived has been recorded. Every assumption you made about my property, every entitled comment, every moment of disrespect, it's all been captured in crystal clear audio and video. I watched Derek's face drain of color as he realized what I was saying. Lisa's mouth fell open, her eyes darting around the property as she spotted camera after camera that she hadn't noticed before. They were everywhere, under the eaves, mounted on trees, hidden in decorative elements around the deck. The entire property was under surveillance. You can't do that, Lisa stammered. That's illegal. Actually, it's completely legal, I replied, my voice calm and professional. This is private property, clearly marked with security signs that you chose to ignore. Everything you've said and done here has been recorded with full legal authority. Derek was frantically looking around now, probably trying to remember every word he had spoken since arriving. Jake, please, let's talk about this reasonably. Oh, we are talking reasonably, I said. In fact, I think the whole family would benefit from seeing just how reasonable this conversation has been. I had prepared for this moment meticulously. With a few clicks on my laptop, I began uploading edited highlights from the security footage to a private video platform. The compilation included Derek's confident arrival, his assumption that he could just walk into my cabin, his dismissive comments about my property, and Lisa's entitled demands. Most importantly, it captured their complete shock when they realized they had no actual permission to be there. I'm creating a little family movie, I announced through the speakers. Derek and Lisa's mountain adventure. It features all your best moments from today, including your honest opinions about my cabin being smaller than expected and how I'm probably grateful someone's finally using this place. The panic on their faces was everything I had hoped for. Derek knew exactly what this meant. Our family lived for gossip and drama, and a video like this would spread through our relatives faster than wildfire. His reputation as the golden boy who could do no wrong would be destroyed in a matter of hours. Please don't send that to anyone, Derek pleaded, his voice breaking slightly. We'll leave right now. We'll apologize to everyone. Just please don't humiliate us. But I wasn't finished. The security system had captured something even better than their initial arrogance. As they stood there pleading with the cameras, I watched Lisa whisper something to Derek that made my blood boil. Just break a window, she hissed, thinking she was out of range of the microphones. We'll claim it was already broken when we got here. Once we're inside, what's he going to do? Call the police on family? The audio system had picked up every word. Derek shook his head violently, pointing at the cameras. But Lisa wasn't backing down. He's bluffing. He won't actually do anything to hurt us. We're family. That's when I realized this wasn't just about entitlement. This was about a fundamental lack of respect for me as a person. They genuinely believed that being related to me gave them the right to take whatever they wanted and that I would never stand up to them because of family loyalty. I had heard enough. Using the security system's emergency features, I activated every alarm on the property simultaneously. Sirens wailed from multiple directions, flashing lights strobed around the perimeter, and an automated voice began announcing, "Unauthorized persons on property. Police have been notified." Derek and Lisa jumped back from the cameras, covering their ears as the alarms continued blaring. The twins started crying, running to their parents in terror. Through it all, I sat in my apartment, watching their panic with cold satisfaction. After 30 seconds, I turned off the alarms. The sudden silence was almost as jarring as the noise had been. "That was just a demonstration," I announced calmly. "But if you attempt to damage my property in any way, the real police will be notified. And unlike the fake emergency announcement, that response will be very real." Derek was defeated. I could see it in the way his shoulders slumped, the way he avoided looking directly at the cameras. But Lisa was still fighting, her voice rising to a shriek that probably scared wildlife for miles around. "This is insane. You're treating us like criminals. We're your family." "You're right," I said. "You are my family, and that makes this betrayal so much worse. A stranger who tried to take my property would just be trespassing. But family who does it? That's a violation of trust that cuts much deeper." I paused, letting that sink in before delivering the final blow. "Which is why I think the whole family needs to see exactly what kind of people you really are when you think nobody's watching." Derek's head snapped up, his eyes wide with terror. "Jake, no, please. Think about what this will do to the family." "I have thought about it," I replied. "I've thought about how you announced your plans without asking me. I've thought thought about how everyone immediately supported you without considering my feelings. I've thought about how you got a key to my property from my own mother without my knowledge. And I've thought about how you just suggested breaking into my cabin when you didn't get your way. The video compilation was ready. 23 minutes of Derek and Lisa at their absolute worst, edited to show the progression from entitled assumption to desperate manipulation to outright criminal suggestion. It was a masterpiece of family destruction, and they knew it. Please, Derek whispered, all his earlier bravado gone. What do you want? What will it take for you to delete that video? For the first time since this whole ordeal began, I smiled. Not the fake smile I had been using through the speakers, but a genuine expression of satisfaction, because Derek had finally asked the right question. What I want, I said slowly, is for you to understand that actions have consequences. What I want is for you to remember this moment the next time you think about taking something that doesn't belong to you. And what I want is for our entire family to see exactly who you really are when you think you can get away with it. The silence stretched for nearly a full minute. Derek and Lisa stood frozen by their cars, probably calculating how much damage the video could do to their social standing, their marriage, their relationships with other family members. Finally, Derek looked directly into the nearest camera. We're sorry, he said, his voice hollow. We're leaving now. Good choice, I replied. But Derek, next time you want to use someone else's property for vacation, maybe try asking first. As I watched their cars disappear down the mountain road, their taillights fading into the evening darkness, I realized that revenge wasn't the sweet satisfaction I had expected. Instead, it felt like justice, like balance being restored to a relationship that had been unfairly tilted for far too long. But the real test was still coming, because tomorrow, the family would see the video. Saturday morning arrived with the kind of crisp mountain air that made me grateful for my grandfather's legacy. I had driven up to the cabin early, partly to assess any potential damage from Derek's visit, but mostly to be present for what was about to unfold. The security cameras had shown me everything I needed to know about their hasty retreat, but I wanted to experience the aftermath from the place where it all began. I was sitting on the deck, coffee in hand, when my phone started buzzing with notifications. The family group chat was exploding with activity, and I knew the video had reached its intended audience. I had scheduled it to post at exactly 9 a.m. with a simple message. Since everyone was so excited about Derek and Lisa's cabin vacation, I thought you'd enjoy seeing how it went. The first response came from my Aunt Sarah, Derek's mother. What is this supposed to mean, Jake? Then my Uncle Tom. Is this some kind of joke? But it was my mother's message that made me smile. Jake, we need to talk. Now. Instead of responding to the group chat, I called my mother directly. She answered on the first ring, her voice tight with barely controlled anger. What the hell is this video, Jake? It's security footage from my cabin, I replied calmly. I thought the family should see what really happened when Derek and Lisa came for their vacation. You deliberately humiliated them. They're devastated. They humiliated themselves, Mom. I just provided the documentation. There was a long pause before she spoke again, and when she did, her voice had taken on the manipulative tone I knew so well. Honey, I know you're upset about the cabin situation, but this is going too far. Derek called me this morning in tears. Lisa won't even talk to anyone. You've destroyed their reputation over a misunderstanding. A misunderstanding? I couldn't keep the incredulity out of my voice. Mom, they announced they were taking my property without asking me. You gave them a key to my cabin without my permission. When I told them to leave, Lisa suggested they should break a window to get inside. What part of that sounds like a misunderstanding to you? Another pause. Then, you never said they couldn't use the cabin. I never said they could use it either. That's the point, Mom. You don't get to assume someone else's property is available just because they don't explicitly tell you no. My phone was buzzing with incoming messages, but I ignored them. This conversation with my mother was more important than anything else happening in the group chat. Jake, please, just delete the video. Derek has learned his lesson. Lisa is mortified. You've made your point. Have I? I asked. Because from where I'm sitting, it sounds like you still think this is my fault. It sounds like you still think I should have just gone along with whatever Derek wanted, because that would have been easier for everyone. That's not what I'm saying. Isn't it? Mom, tell me honestly, if I had said no from the beginning, would you have supported my decision? Or would you have pressured me to change my mind because Derek really needed this vacation? The silence that followed was answer enough. We both knew that if I had refused Derek's demands publicly, I would have been painted as the selfish family member who wouldn't help when help was needed. The video had just revealed what my family really thought of my boundaries. The video stays up, I said finally. And from now on, anyone who wants to use my cabin asks me directly. Not through group announcements, not through assumed permission. They ask me and they respect my answer whether it's yes or no. I hung up before she could respond and turned my attention to the group chat. The reactions were exactly what I had expected. My family had split into two distinct camps, those who were horrified by Derek and Lisa's behavior and those who thought I had gone too far in exposing it. Uncle Tom, I can't believe they were going to break a window. That's just theft. Aunt Jennifer, Derek has always been entitled, but this is beyond the pale. Cousin Maria, Jake, you should have just talked to them privately instead of making this public. Aunt Sarah, this video is going to follow Derek and Lisa for years. How could you do this to family? But it was my cousin Brad's message that surprised me the most. post. Good for you, Jake. About time someone stood up to Derek's bullshit. The responses kept coming throughout the morning. Family members I hadn't heard from in months were suddenly weighing in on the situation. Some were taking sides, others were trying to play peacemaker, and a few were sharing their own stories about times when Derek had overstepped boundaries. Around noon, I received a text from an unknown number. It was Derek. I got a new phone number because people keep calling to ask about the video. Please, Jake, I'm begging you, delete it. Lisa is talking about leaving me. My job found out and HR wants to meet with me on Monday. You've destroyed my life over a cabin. I stared at the message for a long time, feeling something I hadn't expected, a tiny flicker of guilt. But then I remembered his voice on the security footage, casually dismissing my property as something he deserved access to. I remembered Lisa's suggestion to break in when they didn't get their way. I remembered my mother giving them a key without asking me. I typed back, "You destroyed your own life, Derek. I just documented it." His response came immediately. "It was just a vacation. We weren't going to hurt anything." "It was never about the vacation," I replied. "It was about respect. You took something that wasn't yours and assumed I would be fine with it because we're family. You treated my property like it belonged to you. You never once considered that I might have plans for my own cabin. I'm sorry. We're both sorry. What more do you want?" I thought about that question for a long time. What did I want? The video had already accomplished its purpose. My family had seen Derek and Lisa at their worst, and the court of public opinion was split, but leaning in my favor. Derek's reputation was damaged, possibly permanently. Their entitled behavior had been exposed for everyone to see. But more importantly, I had established a boundary, a clear, unambiguous line that said my property was mine, my decisions were mine, and my consent was required before anyone could assume they had access to either. "I want you to remember this feeling," I finally typed back. "I want you to remember what it feels like to have someone else make decisions about your life without asking you. And I want you to never, ever assume you can take something that belongs to someone else just because you're family." Derek didn't respond to that message. But an hour later, I received a call from my grandfather's old lawyer, Mr. Henderson. Apparently, Derek had contacted him asking about the legality of the security system and whether the recordings could be considered invasion of privacy. I told him the same thing I'm telling you. Mr. Henderson said with a chuckle in his voice, "It's your property, clearly marked with security signs, and they were trespassing. If anything, they're lucky you didn't press charges." "Are you suggesting I should press charges?" "I'm suggesting you do whatever feels right to you, Jake. Your grandfather would be proud of how you're protecting his legacy." That evening, as the sun set behind the mountains and painted the sky in brilliant oranges and purples, I sat on the deck where Grandpa Joe used to tell stories about building the cabin with his own hands. The security cameras were still recording, but now they were capturing something peaceful, just me, alone with my thoughts, in the place that belonged to me. My phone buzzed with one final message from the family group chat. It was from my youngest cousin, Emily, who was only 16 but apparently wiser than most of the adults in our family. I watched the video. Derek and Lisa were wrong, and Jake had every right to protect his property. Maybe instead of being mad at Jake for exposing bad behavior, we should be mad at the people who behaved badly. The group chat went silent after that. No one had a response to such simple, clear logic from a teenager. As darkness fell over the mountains, I realized that this wasn't the end of the story. It was the beginning of a new chapter in my relationship with my family. Some bridges had been burned, but others had been strengthened. Some relatives would never forgive me for embarrassing Derek and Lisa, but others would respect me more for standing up for myself. And most importantly, no one would ever again assume they could take my cabin without asking. 6 months later, the fallout from that weekend had reshaped our entire family dynamic. Derek and Lisa's marriage had imploded spectacularly, though I learned later that the cabin incident was just the final straw in a relationship already strained by Derek's entitled behavior and financial irresponsibility. Lisa had moved back to her parents' house with the twins, and Derek was living in a studio apartment across town. His social media presence reduced to pathetic posts about learning to cook ramen noodles. The video had spread far beyond our family circle. Someone had shared it with their friends, who shared it with their friends, until it became a viral sensation about entitled relatives and property rights. Derek's face became an internet meme, and pulling a Derek entered the local vocabulary as slang for assuming you could take something without permission. But the real satisfaction came from watching how the family treated me now. The casual dismissiveness was gone, replaced by a grudging respect that I had never experienced before. When I spoke at family gatherings, people actually listened. When I set boundaries, they were respected without question. The golden boy dynamic that had protected Derek his entire life had finally been shattered. My mother had been forced to confront some uncomfortable truths about her favoritism. After weeks of family members choosing sides, she found herself increasingly isolated as more relatives came forward with their own stories of Derek's entitled behavior over the years. Apparently, I wasn't the only family member who had been quietly enduring his assumptions about other people's property and generosity. The breaking point came during Thanksgiving dinner, when Derek showed up uninvited and tried to act like nothing had changed. He walked into my Aunt Jennifer's house with his usual confidence, expecting the family to welcome him back back into the fold like they always had before. "Hey everyone," he announced, carrying a store-bought pie and that familiar entitled smile. "Sorry I'm a little late. Traffic was murder coming from the city." The room went dead silent. 23 family members suddenly found their plates fascinating, unwilling to make eye contact with the man whose humiliation they had all witnessed in high-definition video. My cousin Brad was the first to speak. "Nobody invited you, Derek. Come on, Brad. It's Thanksgiving. Family doesn't need invitations." "Actually," I said, standing up from my seat at the main table, "family does need invitations. Family asks before assuming they're welcome. Family respects other people's boundaries and property." Derek's face flushed red as he realized that his attempted comeback was falling flat. The room remained silent, but I could feel the support radiating from my relatives. For the first time in my life, I wasn't the outsider at a family gathering. Derek was. "This is ridiculous," Derek muttered, but his voice lacked conviction. "It was just a cabin." "It was never just a cabin." My grandfather's sister Rose spoke up from her wheelchair in the corner. At 87 years old, she commanded respect from everyone in the room. "That cabin represents Joe's legacy, and Jake has honored it beautifully. You treated it like a hotel you could book without paying." Derek looked around the room desperately, searching for an ally. His eyes landed on our mother, who had been uncharacteristically quiet since his arrival. "Mom," he pleaded, "say something." My mother set down her fork and looked at her golden boy with tired eyes. "Derek, I think you should leave." The words hit him like a physical blow. In 34 years of life, our mother had never asked Derek to leave anywhere. She had made excuses for him, covered for him, enabled him, but she had never rejected him. "You're choosing him over me?" Derek's voice cracked as he gestured toward me. "I'm choosing the son who earned my respect," she replied quietly. "The one who worked for everything he has instead of assuming it would be given to him." Derek left without another word, and the Thanksgiving dinner continued as if he had never been there. For the first time in my adult life, I felt like I truly belonged at the family table. The security cameras at the cabin had captured one more important moment a few weeks later. Derek had driven up to the property again, but this time he didn't try to break in or make demands. Instead, he sat in his car for nearly an hour, staring at the cabin through his windshield. I watched the footage later, studying his face through the zoom function. He looked broken, defeated, like a man who had finally realized the true cost of his entitled behavior. When he finally got out of the car, he approached the nearest security camera and spoke directly to it. "Jake, I know you're watching this. I know you can hear me. I just wanted to say that I understand now. I understand what I took from you, and I understand why you did what you did." His voice was hoarse, barely above a whisper. "I don't expect forgiveness. I just wanted you to know that I finally get it." He left a small wrapped package on the doorstep and drove away. Inside, I found my grandfather's old fishing rod, the one Derek had borrowed for a camping trip 5 years ago, and never returned. There was no note, but the message was clear. He was giving back what he had taken, even if it was too late to matter. The cabin remained my sanctuary, but it had also become something more, a symbol of the boundaries I had finally learned to set and maintain. The security system stayed active, not because I expected more trouble from Derek, but because I had learned the value of protecting what was mine. My relationship with the extended family had evolved into something healthier and more honest. The relatives who had supported Derek's entitled behavior gradually distanced themselves, while those who respected personal boundaries became closer friends. The family gatherings became smaller but more genuine. Lisa had reached out to me once, about 3 months after the divorce papers were finalized. She wanted to apologize for her behavior and thank me for opening her eyes to Derek's true character. Apparently, the cabin incident had given her the courage to examine other patterns in their marriage, patterns of entitlement and disrespect that she had been enabling for years. "I spent so much time making excuses for him," she told me over coffee, telling myself that his behavior was normal, that family should just accept whatever he did. Watching that video was like seeing our marriage from the outside for the first time. She was doing well, working as a teacher and raising the twins in a stable environment. The boys were thriving without their father's toxic influence, learning lessons about respect and boundaries that Derek had never been taught. Derek himself had become a cautionary tale whispered about at family gatherings. His name was invoked whenever someone started to overstep boundaries or make assumptions about other people's generosity. "Don't pull a Derek" became shorthand for remembering to ask permission instead of assuming consent. 2 years have passed since that pivotal weekend, and the cabin has never been more peaceful. I've expanded the deck that my grandfather built, added a workshop where I can work on coding projects with a view of the mountains, and installed a hot tub that faces the sunset. Every improvement represents not just an investment in the property, but a celebration of the boundaries I learned to protect. Derek's life continued its downward spiral in ways that even I hadn't anticipated. The viral video had consequences beyond family embarrassment. His employer, a prestigious consulting firm that prided itself on client trust and ethical behavior, had quietly let him go after the footage began circulating among their business partners. His reputation for taking what he felt entitled to, had made him a liability in an industry built on relationship management and respect for boundaries. He'd tried to start his own consulting business, but the internet has a long memory. Potential clients would Google his name and find the cabin video, along with dozens of articles and comment threads dissecting his entitled behavior. The meme of his shocked face when he realized he couldn't get into the cabin had become shorthand for privilege meeting consequences. Last I heard from family gossip, Derek was working at a car rental agency, living paycheck to paycheck in a cramped apartment, and still trying to rebuild relationships with his children, who barely knew him anymore. Lisa had remarried a teacher from her school, a quiet man who understood the value of asking permission and respecting boundaries. The twins were thriving in their new stable environment. My mother had undergone her own transformation. The cabin incident had forced her to examine decades of enabling behavior, and she'd started attending therapy to understand why she had always protected Derek at everyone else's expense. Our relationship had grown stronger as she learned to appreciate the son who had always earned what he received instead of the one who had simply expected it. I spent so many years thinking that love meant never saying no to family. She told me during one of our new regular phone calls, I didn't understand that real love sometimes means letting people face the consequences of their choices. The security cameras still monitored every inch of the property, but they now captured mostly peaceful moments. Wildlife moving through the forest, the changing seasons painting the landscape in different colors, and my own quiet enjoyment of the space my grandfather had built with his own hands. I'd started hosting annual family gatherings at the cabin, but with new rules that everyone understood and respected. People asked permission before coming. They contributed to groceries and utilities. They treated the property with the care it deserved. The gatherings were smaller than they used to be, but infinitely more enjoyable. The viral video had also brought unexpected opportunities. A home security company had reached out about featuring my system in their marketing materials. A documentary filmmaker wanted to interview me about property rights and family dynamics. I declined most of the attention, preferring to let the story speak for itself. But perhaps the most satisfying development was watching how my example had influenced other family members to set their own boundaries. My cousin Maria had finally told her freeloading brother that he couldn't keep borrowing money without paying it back. My Uncle Tom had stopped letting relatives assume they could stay at his beach house whenever they wanted. The ripple effects of that one weekend had spread throughout our entire extended family, creating a healthier culture of mutual respect. The cabin itself had become something of a pilgrimage site for family members who wanted to understand the lesson it represented. They would visit not to take, but to appreciate, to sit on the deck where Derek had made his demands and reflect on the difference between entitlement and gratitude. I kept the original security footage archived on multiple servers, not out of spite, but as a reminder of how quickly family relationships can change when boundaries are finally enforced. The shocked faces of Derek and Lisa when they realized they had no actual permission to be there had become a personal touchstone, a reminder that respect must be earned, not assumed. The most recent development came just last month. Derek had sent me a letter handwritten on cheap paper with no return address. Inside was a simple message. I know I don't deserve forgiveness, and I'm not asking for it. I just wanted you to know that I've learned the lesson you taught me. I ask permission now for everything. It's a harder way to live, but it's the right way. Thank you for showing me that. I didn't respond to the letter, but I didn't throw it away either. It sits in my desk drawer as evidence that even the most entitled person can change when the consequences become real enough. Derek had lost his marriage, his job, his social standing, and his family's support, but he had gained something more valuable, the understanding that other people's boundaries matter. The cabin remains my sanctuary, more secure and peaceful than ever. The security cameras continue recording, but they now capture only the moments I choose to share. Sunsets over the mountains, wildlife in the forest, and the quiet satisfaction of a man who learned to protect what matters most. Sometimes people ask me if I regret how everything played out, if I think the punishment was too severe for Derek's crime. But when I sit on the deck my grandfather built, surrounded by the improvements I've made with my own hands and resources, I know I made the right choice. Derek didn't just take a cabin for a weekend. He took my consent, my boundaries, and my family's respect. He assumed that being related to me gave him ownership over my decisions and my property. The security cameras simply captured the truth of who he really was when he thought no one important was watching. The most beautiful irony is that Derek's attempt to steal my peace ended up giving me more peace than I'd ever known. The boundaries I learned to set at the cabin extended to every area of my life. I became better at saying no to unreasonable demands at work, more confident in personal relationships, and more protective of my own well-being. Today, as I write this from the deck overlooking the valley my grandfather loved, I can honestly say that I have no regrets. The family members who truly loved me learned to respect my boundaries. Those who couldn't respect them revealed they were never really family to begin with. And Derek learned that entitled behavior has consequences, even when you think family family loyalty will protect you from them. The security cameras caught their shocked faces when they realized the truth. But they also captured something more important. The moment I finally learned to value my own peace more than keeping other people comfortable. That lesson was worth every relationship it cost me, and it's a gift I'll carry with me for the rest of my life. What do you think about setting boundaries with entitled family members? Have you ever had to choose between keeping the peace and protecting your own interests? Let me know in the comments below. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like and subscribe for more real-life tales of justice and personal growth. Thanks for watching, and remember, sometimes the most loving thing you can do is let people experience the consequences of their choices.